In the gleaming towers of Chicago's Gold Coast, a war is about to erupt over the largest private fortune in Illinois history. When Sarah Mitchell dove into Lake Michigan that stormy morning, she thought she was just saving another swimmer in distress. She couldn't have been more wrong. Howard Canterbury wasn't just another elderly man. He was a billionaire titan who'd built an empire through 50 years of ruthless business deals and ironclad prenups, a man whose own children hadn't seen him in decades. But in his final weeks of life, Canterbury would do something unprecedented. He would rewrite his entire will for the woman who saved his life. What follows is the story of how a single act of kindness unleashed a hurricane of greed, exposed decades of dark family secrets, and forced Chicago's most powerful dynasty to face the true cost of their father's sins. Before we dive deeper into this tale of wealth and redemption, tell us where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode reveals the shocking contents of Howard Canterbury's final letter, written just hours before his death. 3 days after the rescue, life had almost returned to normal. Sarah stood in her cramped kitchen, sorting through the morning's mail while her coffee grew cold. Another envelope from Northwestern Memorial's billing department joined the growing stack by her refrigerator. She didn't need to open it to know what it said. The red past due stamp, visible through the thin paper, told her everything. "Mum, have you seen my lab coat?" Emma's voice carried from down the hallway of their modest Rogers Park apartment. "Dr. Chen wants us in early for specimen prep." Sarah smiled despite the bills. Her daughter's summer internship at Northwestern's medical research facility was unpaid, but the experience would strengthen her med school applications. "Check the dryer. I ran a load last night." The washing machine had been acting up again, making strange sounds that Sarah chose to ignore. Like the crack in her windshield and the cavity she could feel developing in her back molar, it was just another problem to solve when money wasn't quite so tight. Her phone buzzed with a text from the clinic. One of her regular physical therapy patients had cancelled, leaving an hour gap in her schedule. That meant one less billable hour, one less step toward keeping Emma's dream of medical school alive. Sarah opened her budgeting app, the one Emma had insisted she download to get organized. The numbers stared back at her, a digital representation of years of careful planning and sacrifice. Her salary from the clinic covered the basics: rent, utilities, groceries. Her weekend work at the senior center paid for Emma's textbooks and lab fees. The second mortgage she'd taken out on the apartment helped with tuition, but the interest rate made her stomach clench every time she thought about it. The coffee maker sputtered its last drops into the pot just as Emma emerged. From her room, white lab coat crisp and professional. "You're not still worrying about money, are you?" She hugged Sarah from behind, resting her chin on her mother's shoulder like she used to do as a child. "I told you, I can take out more student loans, or maybe defer for a year, work full-time. Not happening." Sarah closed the app with a decisive tap. "Your job is to become Dr. Emma Mitchell. My job is to make sure you can focus on that." She turned to face her daughter, taking in the determined set of her jaw. So like Tom's, it made her heart ache. "Your father would be so proud of you." Emma's eyes softened at the mention of her dad. "He'd be proud of both of us, Mom. Not everyone could raise a kid alone and put them through college on a physical therapist's salary." Speaking of salary, you're going to be late for your non-paying but very important internship. Sarah handed Emma a travel mug of coffee and her lunch bag. "Text me when you're done. Maybe we can grab dinner at that Thai place you like." After Emma left, Sarah allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to stare at the stack of bills. The topmost envelope bore the logo of the collection agency that had recently acquired her medical debt from Tom's final hospital stay. 6 years later, and she was still paying for the months they'd spent hoping for a miracle, trying experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. She didn't regret a single dollar spent trying to save her husband, but sometimes the weight of those decisions pressed down on her like a physical thing. The morning light caught the silver frame on her bookshelf, Tom and Emma at her high school graduation, his face already gaunt from chemo, but his smile as bright as ever. Next to it sat Emma's acceptance letter to Northwestern's pre-med program, carefully preserved in a dollar store frame that Emma had painted herself. These were the real measures of wealth in Sarah's life: her daughter's determination, the memory of her husband's courage, the simple satisfaction of helping her therapy patients regain their strength and independence. Her phone buzzed again. The clinic manager wanted to know if she could cover an extra shift next weekend. Sarah typed out a quick yes before grabbing her work bag. The elderly millionaire she'd pulled from the lake barely crossed her mind as she locked up. He was just another swimmer who'd needed help, another story to eventually tell Emma over their budget Thai dinner. She had no way of knowing that. Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking Lake Michigan, Howard Canterbury was making a phone call that would change both their lives forever. And in her kitchen drawer, beneath the stack of unpaid medical bills, a business card with an elegantly embossed name waited to bridge the gap between Sarah's world and a family dynasty on the brink of war. The 1975 Chicago Tribune article, yellowed. With age, but carefully preserved behind glass, hung in the lobby of Canterbury Tower. Visionary developer reshapes Chicago skyline. The headline proclaimed, above a photo of a younger Howard Canterbury standing before architectural plans. His expression in the photo was the same one he wore now, staring out the penthouse windows, at the city he'd helped build, a mixture of pride and something darker, more complicated. Marcus Chen, Canterbury's personal secretary for the past 30 years, set down the morning briefing with practiced precision. The board meeting has been moved to 3. Your children's lawyers are still requesting a family meeting, and the medical report you asked for is on page 4. Howard didn't turn from the window. Tell me, Marcus, what would you do with $4 billion? Sir, it's a simple question. $4 billion, give or take a few $100 million depending on the market. What would you do with it? Marcus adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, a habit from decades of navigating his employer's mercurial moods. I suppose I've never given it much thought. My children think about it constantly. Howard's reflection smiled grimly in the glass. Victoria's already planning to take the company public. Alexander wants to sell everything and move operations to Dubai. And Charlotte, he shook his head. Charlotte just wants to watch it all burn. The morning sun caught the edge of Howard's watch. Not his usual Patek Philippe, which was still being restored after the lake incident, but a simple Timex that looked out of place with his bespoke suit. That woman who pulled me out. What did you find out about her? Marcus consulted his tablet. Sarah Mitchell, age 46. Physical therapist at Lakeview Medical Center. Widow. One daughter in college. No criminal record, no bankruptcies, though. Her financial situation appears modest. She's been working double shifts to pay for her daughter's pre-med program at Northwestern. And the daughter? Emma Mitchell, age 20. Exceptional academic record, currently interning at Northwestern's medical research facility. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, died of pancreatic cancer 6 years ago. The medical bills apparently depleted most of the family's savings. Howard nodded slowly. Send flowers to Ms. Mitchell, something appropriate, and have legal draw-up papers for a college fund for the daughter. Sir? Marcus looked up sharply. Your children won't... My children haven't spoken to me directly. In 15 years, Marcus. They communicate through lawyers and threats. Victoria hasn't let me meet my own grandchildren. Howard turned from the window, and for the first time in years, Marcus saw something like purpose in his employer's eyes. That woman didn't know who I was. She didn't check my wallet or my watch before diving in. When was the last time someone helped me without wanting something in return? Marcus thought of the file he kept locked in his office safe, the one documenting 30 years of family schemes and power plays. Victoria's attempted hostile takeover in 2008, Alexander's offshore account manipulations, Charlotte's leaked board, documents that had nearly triggered an SEC investigation. Each of Howard's children had been raised in luxury and taught that power was the only currency that mattered. The board won't approve of personal gifts of that size without oversight, Marcus said carefully. Howard's laugh was sharp and sudden. The board? Did you know that Sarah Mitchell makes in a year what our board members spend on lunch? She works harder than any of them, does more good in a day than they do in a year. And her daughter, he picked up the medical report, scanning it again. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe 8 if I'm lucky. That's not much time to fix 30 years. Of mistakes, is it? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office's perfect climate control. He'd watched the Canterbury children tear into far smaller threats to their inheritance. If Howard was planning what Marcus suspected, "Sir, perhaps we should discuss this after you've rested. The lake incident was traumatic, and I'm dying, Marcus, not senile." Howard's voice had the same steel that had built his empire. "Call Judge Harrison. I want to review my will, and get me everything you can find about physical therapy licensing requirements in Illinois. If Sarah Mitchell is going to be part of this, she'll need to expand her practice. The children will fight it, of course they will." Howard smiled, and for a moment Marcus saw the man who had once outmaneuvered every developer in Chicago. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." The Morning Sun caught the Tribune article's frame, highlighting words that seemed suddenly prophetic. "Howard Canterbury isn't just building towers," the article concluded. "He's creating a legacy that will reshape Chicago for generations to come." In his office safe, Marcus had another article, this one from a Society column 20 years ago. "Canterbury Children Shine at Charity Gala." The photo showed 3 beautiful, smiling young people who still believed they would inherit the world. He wondered if they remembered taking it, or if, like their father, they only remembered the battles that came after. The Lakeview Medical Center's physical therapy wing wasn't used to visitors in tailored Italian suits. Sarah was helping Mr. Rodriguez with his knee exercises when she noticed the sudden hush fall over the normally bustling clinic. Howard Canterbury stood in the doorway, looking simultaneously out of place and completely at ease, the way only the very wealthy can manage. "Miss Mitchell," he smiled, holding up a familiar object. "I believe I owe you a proper thank you." Sarah helped Mr. Rodriguez back to his chair, her mind racing. The man looked different on dry land, more substantial somehow despite his age. "Mr. Canterbury, I didn't expect... How did you find me?" "Finding people is something of a specialty of mine." He moved into the room with careful dignity, nodding to the other patients. In his hand was a business card, cream-colored and thick, as velvet. "I thought perhaps we could discuss your remarkable swimming technique over coffee." The card felt heavy in Sarah's hand, like it carried the weight of more than just contact information. The embossed letters caught the fluorescent. "Like the Howard Canterbury Development Group." Below that, a handwritten note in precise script, "For the woman who values life over legacy." "I'm with patients until 6, Sarah said, trying to find her footing in this surreal moment. She'd seen his name in the news over the years, of course. Canterbury Developments dominated the Chicago skyline, but the man himself was known for being reclusive, almost mythical in his absence from public life. 7 o'clock then. The signature room. Unless heights bother you? There was something almost playful in his tone, a hint of the man he must have been before wealth and time had carved their marks. Sarah thought of the unpaid bills in her kitchen drawer, of Emma's tuition payments looming like storm clouds. "Mr. Canterbury, I appreciate the gesture, but please," he held up a hand. "Allow an old man to express his gratitude. No strings, no expectations. Just coffee and conversation with the person who reminded me what matters." Later, Sarah would remember. This is the moment she could have said no, could have stayed in her safe, struggling world of double shifts and careful budgeting. But there was something in Howard Canterbury's eyes, a loneliness she recognized from her own mirror on the anniversaries of Tom's death. 7 o'clock. She agreed. He nodded once, satisfied. "My car will pick you up at 6:30. The view from the 95th floor is best at sunset. After he left, Sarah's supervisor appeared at her elbow, wide-eyed. Was that Howard Canterbury, the Howard Canterbury? Apparently. Sarah tucked the business card into her pocket, its weight a reminder that her ordinary life had somehow swerved into extraordinary territory. Sarah, her supervisor's voice was hushed. That man could buy this entire hospital without blinking. What does he want with you? It was the question everyone would ask in the months to come as the story unfolded, in ways none of them could have predicted. But in that moment, Sarah only smiled and turned back to her patients. She had 3 more hours of therapy sessions, a twisted ankle waiting in room 2, and a teenage basketball player with a torn ACL in room 4. Coffee with a billionaire wasn't going to change that. But as she worked through her afternoon appointments, her fingers kept brushing against the card in her pocket. The last line of the handwritten note lingered in her mind. Life over legacy. What had he meant by that? At 6:15, Sarah changed out of her scrubs into the spare outfit she kept at work, simple black pants and a blue blouse that Emma always said brought out her eyes. Her practical shoes would look out of place at the signature room, but she hadn't survived single motherhood by caring too much about appearances. The black car waiting outside was as understated as it was obviously expensive. The driver held the door with practiced efficiency, and Sarah found herself sliding into leather seats softer than any she'd ever touched. As the car pulled away from the curb, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the tinted window. She looked exactly the same as she had that morning, a middle-aged physical therapist with worry lines and practical clothes. But somehow, everything felt different, like the first ripple before a wave, like the quiet before a storm. The business card sat in her lap, its embossed letters catching the evening light. Unknown to Sarah across the city, 3 other cards were being delivered to the offices of Victoria, Alexander, and Charlotte Canterbury. Their message was shorter. The game is changing. Choose your moves carefully. H.C. The signature room lived up to its reputation. Floor-to-ceiling windows transformed Chicago into a glittering tapestry of lights. But Sarah found her attention drawn to the photograph Howard had placed on the table between them. The colors had faded to sepia tones, but the joy in the image remained vibrant. A younger Howard Canterbury, surrounded by 3 children and a beautiful woman, all of them laughing at some forgotten joke. Christmas, 1985, Howard said, his finger tracing the edge of the photograph. Before the divorce, before the empire became more important than the family it was meant to support. He looked older in the dimmed restaurant lighting, the weight of decades visible in his shoulders. Your children, Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Everyone in Chicago knew the Canterbury children, even if only through tabloid headlines and business news. Victoria, Alexander, and Charlotte. He pointed to each smiling face. Victoria was already showing signs of her business acumen. She'd organized the household staff into a mock corporation. Alexander had just discovered computers. He rewired the entire house for what he called optimal connectivity. And Charlotte. His voice softened. Charlotte still believed in magic back then. Sarah sipped her wine, a vintage that probably cost more than her monthly rent. What changed? Everything. Nothing. Howard's laugh held no humor. I built towers, made deals, expanded the empire. Margaret, their mother, wanted them to have a normal childhood. We fought about it quietly at first, then not so quietly. The children chose sides. Money has a way of turning every relationship into a transaction. A waiter appeared with their appetizers, each plate a work of art that seemed almost too precious to eat. Howard waited until they were alone again before continuing. Victoria was 16 when she first tried to convince the board I was making poor decisions. Alexander was 20 when he attempted to shift company assets through a series of shell corporations. Charlotte. He shook his head. Charlotte burned down her trust fund apartment and used the insurance money to fund environmental protests against our developments. Sarah studied the photograph again. The happy family seemed impossibly distant from the warfare Howard described. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the first person in 30 years who helped me without checking my net worth first." Howard pulled out another photograph, this one more recent. 3 adults at a charity gala, perfectly dressed and completely separate despite standing side by side. "My children haven't spoken directly to me in 15 years. Everything goes through lawyers now. Victoria won't let me see my grandchildren. Alexander lives in Dubai, managing our international interests and probably several schemes I don't know about. Charlotte," he smiled sadly, "Charlotte sends me obituaries of developers who died alone." The city lights sparkled below them, each one representing lives and stories they'd never know. Sarah thought of Emma, of their small apartment filled with love despite its lacking luxury. "It's not too late, you know, to try and fix things. That's exactly what I intend to do." Howard's expression shifted, showing a glimpse of the shrewd businessman who'd built an empire. "But not in the way they expect. Tell me, Sarah, what do you know about physical therapy licensing requirements for multiple locations?" The sudden change in topic caught her off guard. Well, each location needs separate certification. There are staffing requirements, insurance considerations, and if someone wanted to open, say, a network of rehabilitation centers, combining physical therapy with other wellness services, making premium care accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford gold-plated insurance. Sarah's mind raced with the possibilities. That would take significant capital investment. The licensing alone, $4 billion, give or take. Howard smiled at her shocked expression. "That's what the Canterbury Empire is worth today. My children think it's their birthright. They're already fighting over how to spend it. But money without purpose is poison. I learned that too late for them. Maybe it's not too late for others." The implications slowly dawned on Sarah. "Mr. Canterbury." "Howard, please. Howard, whatever you're planning, your children won't accept it." Quietly, he reached for the older photograph, but his hand trembled slightly. "No, they won't. That's why I need someone who understands the value of helping others, someone who jumps into rough waters without checking for a reward." His eyes met hers. "Someone who still believes that not everything in life should have a price tag." The city continued its glittering dance below them, unaware that in this quiet corner of the signature room, the first moves of a high-stakes game were being made. And in his office across town, Marcus Chen was already preparing the documents that would set everything in motion. Victoria Canterbury Drake stood at the window of her Michigan Avenue office, her father's business card burning a hole in her Chanel zoot pocket. Behind her, lawyers from 3 different firms waited with practiced patience while she processed the implications of their latest discovery. "Run it by me again," she said, her voice carrying the same steel edge that had made her Chicago's most feared corporate negotiator. "This woman, this physical therapist, has met with our father how many times now?" 7 meetings in the past 2 weeks, replied the youngest lawyer, consulting his tablet. "Dinner at the signature room, lunch at Spiaggia, several private meetings in his office. Mr. Canterbury has also made inquiries about medical facility licensing and healthcare management regulations." Victoria turned, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. At 45, she was a mirror of her mother's young beauty, hardened by 2 decades of boardroom battles. And the background check: Sarah Mitchell, widow, 1 daughter in college, no criminal record, no suspicious financial activity. Her husband died of pancreatic cancer 6 years ago, leaving significant medical debt. She's been working double shifts to put her daughter through Northwestern's pre-med program. The lawyer paused. "She appears unremarkable." "No one is unremarkable. When it comes to $4 billion. Victoria pulled out her father's prenuptial agreement from the wall safe, her mother's signature faded but clear, on the final page. Get me Alexander on the line. 12 time zones away, Alexander Canterbury was already reviewing the same information in his Dubai office. At 42, he'd transformed the international arm of Canterbury Development into a digital age powerhouse. Though his methods occasionally skirted the edges of financial regulations. "Our father doesn't take midnight swims," he told his sister's image on the video call. "He doesn't go anywhere without security, and he certainly doesn't have coffee with random Good Samaritans." Victoria's image flickered on the screen. "You think it was staged? I think nothing involving Howard Canterbury happens by accident." Alexander pulled up the surveillance photos his team had taken. Sarah Mitchell leaving work. Sarah Mitchell at the grocery store. Sarah Mitchell and her daughter having dinner at a cheap Thai restaurant. "She looks clean. Too clean. Charlotte needs to know." Alexander laughed without humor. "Good luck with that. Has anyone even heard from her since the pipeline protest?" As if on cue, both their phones buzzed with a message. Charlotte Canterbury, the youngest at 38, had sent them a link to her latest blog post. The headline read, "Canterbury, Empire built on buried bodies." Below it was a detailed exposé of their father's earliest real estate deals, complete with environmental impact reports and displacement statistics. "At least she's consistent," Alexander muttered. Victoria ignored. The blog post, "We need to meet in person. No lawyers, no devices, no traces." The usual place. "Tomorrow, midnight. If this woman is a threat, we need to handle it before father does something irreversible." In her Brooklyn apartment, Charlotte Canterbury read her siblings' encrypted messages with a mixture of amusement and disgust. Her laptop showed multiple screens. Her father's medical records, obtained through questionable means, Sarah Mitchell's complete digital footprint, surprisingly minimal, and the latest draft of her book on corporate crime. Working title, "The Canterbury Sins, A Daughter's Exposé." Her phone rang. The secure line only 3 people had the number to. "Marcus," she answered, knowing the faithful secretary's timing. "Was never coincidental. Come to warn me about another lawsuit?" "Your father has amended his will." Marcus's voice was carefully neutral, as it had been through 20 years of family warfare. "The changes are significant." Charlotte's fingers flew over her keyboard, pulling up her father's private server access. "How significant?" "Significant enough that your siblings meeting tomorrow night won't change anything." She paused. "You're not supposed to know about that meeting. I've worked for your father for 30 years, Miss Canterbury. There's very little I don't know." He hesitated. "Your father's condition is deteriorating faster than expected." Charlotte absorbed this, her anger at the Empire momentarily, overshadowed by a more primal emotion. "Does she know? This Sarah Mitchell?" "Not yet, but she will." Marcus's tone softened slightly. "She's not what you think, Miss Canterbury. She's not what any of you think." After hanging up, Charlotte stared at her screens. The woman in the surveillance. Photos looked ordinary, unremarkable. Exactly the kind of person who might actually help a drowning stranger without ulterior motives, which made her, in the Canterbury world, the most dangerous kind of person imaginable. In their separate corners of the world, 3 siblings reached the same conclusion. Sarah Mitchell couldn't be bought, couldn't be threatened, and couldn't be ignored. She was either the most brilliant con artist they'd ever encountered or something far more threatening, a genuine person who had somehow cracked their father's legendary defenses. Neither option was acceptable. In his penthouse office, Howard Canterbury reviewed the security footage of his children's recent activities, a faint smile playing on his lips. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He picked up his phone. "Sarah, I wonder if you might join me for breakfast tomorrow. There's something important we need to discuss." The photograph lay on Howard's desk, like a confession, a candid shot of a little girl feeding ducks, her dark curls catching the sunlight. Lucy Canterbury, age 7, Victoria's youngest daughter, a granddaughter Howard had never met. "She has your eyes," Sarah said softly, studying the picture Marcus had obtained. Victoria's chin, but definitely your eyes. Howard's hands shook slightly as he touched the photo's edge. Victoria sends formal school portraits every Christmas, through her assistant, of course. This is the first time I've seen Lucy just being a child. Sarah thought of Emma at that age, of precious moments that couldn't be captured in formal portraits. She feeds the ducks at Lincoln Park Zoo every Saturday morning. Victoria's housekeeper takes her while Victoria's at the office. Howard's head snapped up. How do you... I did some research of my own. Sarah smiled. My daughter Emma's internship? It's in the same building where Lucy takes ballet lessons. Sometimes paths cross, even in a city this big. Something shifted in Howard's expression. Hope warring with decades of practiced detachment. Victoria has restraining orders, security teams, an entire legal department dedicated to keeping me away from her children. Good thing I'm not you then. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing him a text message. Emma's made friends with Lucy's ballet teacher. Apparently there's a recital this weekend. Small studio, very exclusive, only family allowed. She paused. Though I hear they make exceptions for physical therapists doing professional assessments of their dance program. For a moment, Howard Canterbury looked his age. All the power and wealth stripped away, leaving just a grandfather who wanted to see his granddaughter dance. Victoria will be there. In Dubai, actually. Business merger. Lucy's housekeeper is bringing her. Sarah's expression softened. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for people is give them a chance to pretend they didn't see something coming. Saturday morning found them in the back row of a small dance studio. Howard, dressed down in slacks and a sweater instead of his usual suits, looked both terrified and exhilarated. Sarah sat beside him, clipboard in hand, playing her part as a consulting therapist. When Lucy came out in her tutu, Howard's breath caught. She was all poise and determination until she stumbled slightly, and then her face showed a flash of the same stubborn pride Sarah had seen in Howard's old photographs. She's perfect, Howard whispered. After the recital, Sarah made a show of taking notes, while Lucy and the other young dancers gathered their things. She watched from the corner of her eye as the little girl noticed Howard, curiosity overtaking her rehearsed caution around strangers. You look like my photo, Lucy said suddenly, stopping in front of their seats. Howard's voice was steady, though Sarah could see his hands trembling. What photo? The one Mommy keeps in her special drawer. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping. Lucy tilted her head. You're my grandfather, aren't you? The one who builds tall buildings? I am. Howard swallowed hard. You dance beautifully, Lucy. Do you want to see my favorite duck? He has a crooked beak, but that just makes him special. I named him Sir Quacks. She looked at her housekeeper, who was pretending to be very interested. In adjusting Lucy's dance bag. We're going to feed him now, if you want to come. Later, as they watched Lucy toss breadcrumbs to Sir Quacks, Sarah captured a picture on her phone. Howard and his granddaughter, both laughing as the duck with the crooked beak waddled closer. In the sunlight, their matching eyes crinkled at the corners in exactly the same way. Send that to Victoria, Howard said quietly. Sarah looked at him in surprise. Are you sure? With a message, sometimes the tallest walls are the ones we build ourselves. He watched Lucy name each duck that approached. It's time to stop hiding behind lawyers and legacies. As if on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert from a local news website. Someone had spotted them, the reclusive Howard Canterbury, at a children's ballet recital. By evening, it would be all over Chicago's social media. Sometimes, Sarah realized, the kindest acts were also the most revolutionary. And in the gathering media storm, a little girl's laughter rang out clear and true, beginning to heal a family's wounds, one duck-feeding session at a time. The envelope had no return address, just Sarah's name typed in stark black letters. She found it wedged under her apartment door after her evening shift. its expensive paper out of place in her modest hallway. Inside was a single sheet with a message that made her blood run cold. Every saint has a past. Every sinner has a future. Choose wisely. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, why are there reporters outside my lab building?" The ballet recital photo had gone viral overnight. Chicago's social media channels were buzzing with speculation about the mysterious woman who had somehow penetrated the Canterbury family's infamous walls. Canterbury grandfather was trending, alongside less flattering hashtags questioning Sarah's motives. Ms. Mitchell. Marcus's voice on her phone was tighter than usual. "Mr. Canterbury requests your presence at the office immediately." The Canterbury Tower lobby was chaos. Reporters pressed against the glass, cameras flashing. Security guards formed a barrier as Sarah was rushed inside. In the elevator, Marcus handed her a tablet showing multiple news sites, all featuring variations of the same headline: "Mystery Woman Orchestrates Canterbury Family Reunion." "Victoria's plane landed an hour ago," Marcus said quietly. "She's already called an emergency board meeting." Howard waited in his office, standing at his usual spot, by the windows. But today, the city's golden morning light failed to soften the tension in his shoulders. "I should have warned you," he said without turning, "about how they would react." "I can handle reporters," Sarah started. But Howard shook his head. "The reporters are nothing, a smokescreen." He finally faced her, and she was struck by how tired he looked. "Victoria has frozen my personal accounts pending a competency investigation. Alexander is flying in from Dubai. And Charlotte..." He gestured to his computer screen, where a new blog post blazed. "Canterbury's new companion, saint or sophisticated scammer." Sarah's phone buzzed again. "Emma. Mum, you won't believe what just happened. Northwestern just offered me a full scholarship. For med school, all expenses covered. What's going on?" Howard's expression didn't change when she showed him the message. "Victoria's opening move, buying you off without seeming to. Very elegant." "I don't understand. The scholarship comes from a foundation Victoria controls. Accept it, and there will be strings. Invisible, legal but binding. My daughter doesn't make offers. She sets traps." He smiled grimly. "She learned that from me." A soft chime announced an incoming email on Howard's computer. Marcus stepped forward to read it, his professional mask slipping slightly. "Sir, Alexander has filed an injunction. He's requesting a full audit of all your recent activities and a freeze on any pending changes to corporate structure or private trusts, right on schedule." Howard sank into his chair, looking more amused than concerned. "And Charlotte?" 3. Investigative reporters have requested interviews with Ms. Mitchell. They claim to have evidence of irregularities in her husband's medical bills. Sarah felt the floor tilt slightly. "What?" Howard's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "They're very good at this, Sarah. They've had years of practice. Every person who's ever tried to get close to me or my money, they find the pressure points, the weak spots, the things that matter most." "I never wanted your money," Sarah said quietly. "I know. That's exactly why they're terrified of you." Howard pulled out a folder. Thick, official looking. "Everything I'm about to do, I planned before I met you. But knowing you, it confirmed what I already knew needed to be done. Before he could continue, the office doors burst open. Victoria Canterbury Drake stood in the doorway, every inch the corporate warrior in her designer suit and stilettos, her eyes locked onto Sarah with laser intensity. "Hello, Father," she said, her voice arctic. "I see you've been quite busy with your new friend." Behind her, a team of lawyers filed in, carrying stacks of documents. Sarah recognized the heading on one: "Emergency Petition for Conservatorship." Howard didn't seem surprised. If anything, he looked relieved. "Right on time, Victoria, though you'll want to read this first." He held up the folder. "Dated 2 weeks before I met Sarah. Notarized, witnessed, and ironclad. Marcus, the faithful secretary, stepped forward, producing identical folders for each lawyer. "Your father's new will," he explained, along with his medical records, cognitive evaluations, and documentation of every decision made in the past 3 months. Victoria's perfect composure cracked just slightly. "You planned this for longer than you know." Howard's voice was gentle, almost sad. "The question is, did you plan for it?" Sarah stood very still, feeling the weight of generational warfare settling around her. The anonymous threat in her purse felt less like a warning now, and more like a promise. The storm wasn't gathering, it had arrived. Howard's diary lay open on the hospital table, his normally precise handwriting becoming increasingly unsteady with each entry. Sarah read the latest page while he slept, machines beeping softly in the private suite. October 15th. The irony isn't lost on me. I spent decades building an empire reaching toward the sky, only to find real meaning in a woman who pulled me from the depths. The doctors say weeks now, not months. Victoria's lawyers circle like vultures, but they're missing the point entirely. This was never about the money. Sarah sees it. Maybe that's why they fear her so much. The door opened quietly, and Marcus slipped in with fresh flowers. Roses, always roses, though Howard could no longer smell them. "His oxygen levels are better this morning," he said, arranging the blooms. "The new medication seems to be helping." Sarah nodded, watching Howard's chest rise and fall. In just 2 months, the powerful figure who had commanded an empire had become fragile, almost translucent. But his mind remained sharp as ever, especially during their late-night conversations. "Tell me about Emma," he had said the night before. Between labored breaths, "Tell me again about her first science fair project." So Sarah had told him about 12-year-old Emma's determination to prove that music affected plant growth, about the tiny speaker she'd rigged up next to each pot, about her conviction that Mozart made the best flowers. Howard had listened, with the same intensity he once gave to billion-dollar deals. "She reminds me of Charlotte at that age," he'd whispered, "before money poisoned everything, before I poisoned everything." A soft knock interrupted Sarah's memories. Lucy stood in the doorway, clutching a handmade card. Behind her, the housekeeper hovered nervously, clearly expecting Victoria's security team to materialize at any moment. "I drew Sir Quacks," Lucy announced, tiptoeing to her grandfather's bedside. "See? His crooked beak makes him special." Howard's eyes fluttered open, focusing immediately on his granddaughter. "It's perfect," he said, his voice stronger than it had been all morning. "Would you like to hear a story about another special duck?" While Howard told Lucy about a duckling he'd rescued as a boy, Sarah stepped into the hallway with Marcus. "Victoria's filed another injunction," he informed her quietly. "Alexander's legal team is demanding daily cognitive evaluations. And Charlotte, let me guess, another exposé?" "No." Marcus looked troubled. "She's gone silent. In my experience, that's when she's most dangerous." Sarah rubbed her temples. The past week had been a blur of legal papers, reporters, and thinly veiled threats. Emma's scholarship offer had been mysteriously withdrawn, then reinstated with new conditions, then withdrawn again. Someone had leaked Tom's complete medical history to 3 different newspapers, along with suggestions of insurance fraud. "They still don't understand," Howard's voice called from the room. Lucy had fallen asleep in the chair next to his bed, her small hand clutching his. "Come here, both of you. It's time." Marcus closed the door behind them, standing guard as he had for 30 years. Howard's eyes were clear, focused. "Sarah, do you know why I chose you? Because I saved your life? Because you tried to save me without knowing who I was? Because you worked double shifts helping others heal? Because you raised a daughter who believes in the power of Mozart on flowers?" He smiled at Lucy's sleeping form. "The money was always a test, you see. One my children failed decades ago." "Sir," Marcus started, but Howard waved him quiet. "My children think this is about inheritance. They're wrong. This is about legacy. Howard's hand shook as he reached for a folder hidden beneath his pillow. Everything is ready. The foundations, the healthcare centers, the educational trusts. All of it set up before I ever met you, Sarah. But you proved I was right. That money without meaning is worse than no money at all. He handed Sarah the folder. Inside were blueprints for something called the Canterbury Mitchell Rehabilitation Network, a nationwide chain of affordable physical therapy and wellness centers. The business model was brilliant, revolutionary even, and on every page a single phrase repeated, making premium care accessible to everyone. Your children will fight this, Sarah said softly. Of course they will. That's why the centers are already built. Howard's smile turned mischievous. Shell companies, blind trusts, offshore accounts. I learned those tricks long before Alexander thought he invented them. The money's already spent, the contract's signed. All that's left is for someone to run it. Someone who understands that true wealth isn't about what you have, but what you give. Sarah stared at the blueprints, at her name next to his on a dream bigger than any tower. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed them to show their true colors first. To prove to the board, to the public, to themselves, exactly why this was necessary. He squeezed Lucy's hand gently. The future belongs to those who build bridges, not walls. Remember that when they come for you. Because they will come for you, Sarah. And soon. As if summoned by his words, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Victoria's voice, sharp and commanding, Alexander's deeper tones, and Charlotte's silence, more eloquent than any shout. The storm was about to break. The amended will sat unopened on the mahogany conference table, its heavy cream envelope bearing only the Canterbury Corp logo and a simple date. Around the table, Chicago's most expensive lawyers shifted uncomfortably, while Howard Canterbury's children maintained their practiced poses of indifference. Only Sarah, seated at the far end by Marcus's quiet insistence, allowed her grief to show openly. Howard had died 3 days ago, holding Lucy's drawing of Sir Quacks and whispering something only Sarah had heard. Remember, bridges, not walls. Victoria sat directly across from the family attorney, her posture royal in its rigidity. Alexander had chosen to stand by the window, as their father always had, though the pose seemed affected on him. Charlotte lounged in her chair with studied casualness, but her fingers kept touching the jade pendant Howard had given her on her 16th birthday, her only visible tell. Before we begin, the attorney said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, Mr. Canterbury left specific instructions about the viewing of a video message. Victoria's perfect eyebrows arched slightly. A video? A screen descended from the ceiling, and Howard Canterbury's face filled it, recorded in his office just weeks before. He looked tired but determined. Every inch the empire builder, even in his final days. If you're watching this, he began, then I've finally run out of time. Victoria, stop looking for loopholes. Alexander, your offshore accounts won't help you now. And Charlotte, dear, I've read your latest exposé draft. You're right about most of it, wrong about what matters. The siblings stirred, masks slipping. Howard's ghost continued, I built this empire on a simple principle. Find what people need, give it to them, and make them pay for the privilege. It worked. Too well. I became the very thing I once despised. A man who saw every relationship as a transaction, every person as an asset or liability. He leaned closer to the camera. When Sarah Mitchell pulled me from Lake Michigan, she didn't see Howard Canterbury, billionaire developer. She saw a drowning man, and for the first time in decades, I saw myself clearly too. The lawyer paused the video. Mr. Canterbury's amended will is quite unusual. Perhaps we should play it, Charlotte commanded, her voice rough. Howard's image continued. To my children, you'll receive exactly what you've earned. Victoria, your ruthless efficiency in protecting the company's interests has earned you the position of CEO of the new Canterbury Mitchell Foundation, which now controls 70% of our assets. You'll report to a board whose mission is making healthcare and rehabilitation services accessible to everyone. Fight it and you lose everything. Lead it and you might finally understand what I failed to teach. You. Victoria's knuckles whitened on the armrest. Alexander, your financial cunning has earned you the chance to turn it towards something meaningful. You'll head international expansion of our rehabilitation centers under the Foundation's oversight. Charlotte, your passion for exposing corporate wrongs has earned you a seat on the Foundation's ethics board, with real power to ensure we never stray from our mission. Charlotte's hand froze on her pendant. The remaining 30% of the empire is divided equally among my grandchildren, held in trust until they complete 1 year of public service in our rehabilitation centers. Lucy, my dear, Sir Quacks would approve. Howard's eyes softened. And Sarah Mitchell, who showed me that true wealth lies in simple kindness. You'll oversee it all as Foundation President, not because you saved my life, but because you reminded me what life is for. The screen went dark. In the silence, the attorney opened the envelope and began reading the formal documents that would reshape one of America's great fortunes. Victoria's. Lawyers instantly began raising objections, while Alexander's team huddled in urgent whispers. Charlotte sat very still, a strange smile playing at her lips. Sarah felt Marcus touch her elbow. "There's more," he whispered, sliding a smaller envelope to her. Inside was a handwritten note. "Sarah, they'll fight this, of course, but I've had 30 years to make it ironclad. The centers are built, the trusts are funded, the contracts are signed. All they can do now is choose, adapt or lose everything. You showed me that it's never too late to change course. Now you'll show them. P.S. Emma's medical school is paid for. No strings, no conditions. Some things should be simple. H.C." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago's skyline stretched. Toward the clouds, Howard's legacy in steel and glass. But Sarah knew his true legacy was just beginning, written not in towers, but in the bridges about to be built, in the walls about to fall. Victoria stood suddenly, her chair scraping back. "This is war," she announced to no one in particular. Sarah thought of Howard's last words, of Lucy's crooked-beaked duck, of simple kindness winning over complex greed. "No," she said quietly. "This is healing." The viral social media post appeared within hours of the will reading. An old photo of Sarah at a hospital fundraiser, split-screened with security footage of her helping Howard from the lake. The caption read, "From drowning rescue to billion-dollar. Takeover, coincidence, or Chicago's greatest con?" Within minutes, it had been shared thousands of times, each repost adding new layers of speculation and accusation. Sarah discovered this while having dinner with Emma at their favorite Thai restaurant, their last attempt at normalcy before the storm broke. Her daughter slid the phone across the table, showing her the trending hashtags: "A Canterbury Conspiracy," "No's Gold Digger Rescue," "A Howard's Fool." "Mom," Emma said softly, "there are reporters outside our apartment." Sarah's phone buzzed with urgent messages from Marcus. Victoria had called an emergency board meeting. Alexander's team was preparing injunctions in 3 countries. Charlotte had vanished completely, though her blog remained ominously silent. "Miss Mitchell?" Their waitress appeared nervous. "There are some people outside with cameras. The owner says you can use the back exit through the kitchen." They left their half-eaten pad thai, slipping out between steaming woks and startled kitchen staff. Marcus had sent a car, not one of the Canterbury fleet, but an unmarked sedan with tinted windows. The driver took a circuitous route, losing the 2 news vans that tried to follow. "You can't go home tonight?" the driver said, Marcus's efficiency in his tone. "We've arranged a suite at the Peninsula, under a different name." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "My internship supervisor called, said I should take some time, off until things settle down." Sarah thought of Howard's last note. "Emma's medical school is paid for. Even his kindness had become ammunition in the public eye. The peninsula's service entrance felt like a scene from a movie. Security guards, hushed instructions, a swift elevator ride to a high floor. In the suite, Marcus waited with a stack of newspapers and tablets displaying various news sites. Each headline was worse than the last. Canterbury fortune, hijacked by mystery woman, family fury as billions redirected to healthcare scheme. Who is Sarah Mitchell, inside the life of Chicago's newest power player? They're calling the morning shows, Marcus said, his usual calm strained. Every network wants an exclusive. Victoria's people are pushing a narrative about elderly manipulation and financial abuse. Alexander's team is hinting at a longer conspiracy. And Charlotte, he paused. Charlotte just posted this. He handed Sarah a tablet open to Charlotte's blog. The newest entry was simple but devastating. A detailed timeline of Sarah's financial struggles, Tom's medical bills, Emma's college expenses. It ended with a question. How far would a desperate mother go to secure her daughter's future? There. Going through our whole lives, Emma whispered. Dad's cancer treatment, the second mortgage, everything. Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the city Howard had helped build. Somewhere out there, Victoria was marshalling her legal armies. Alexander was moving money through his labyrinth of accounts. Charlotte was digging deeper into their past. And Lucy? Sarah wondered if Lucy was feeding Sir Quacks, still innocent of the war her grandfather had started. Her phone chimed with a message from an unknown number. A photo appeared. Sarah helping an elderly patient at the clinic, taken yesterday. The message below it read, "Everything you do, everything you've done, everything you will do. We're watching." "Walk away now." Emma looked over her shoulder at the message. "Mom, maybe we should—" "No." Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. "Your father spent his last months fighting for his life. Howard spent his last months fighting for something bigger than himself. I won't let fear undo either of their legacies." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Mr. Canterbury said you'd say that. He also left instructions for this moment." He opened his briefcase, removing a thick folder. "Everything you need to know about the Canterbury Mitchell Foundation's first 5 rehabilitation centers. They're ready to open, fully staffed, just waiting for your signal." Sarah took the folder, feeling its weight. Not just paper, but responsibility. Purpose, the chance to help thousands of people like Tom, who deserved care regardless of their bank balance. "Howard built towers," she said, remembering his last words. "We're going to build bridges." Outside the hotel, cameras flashed in the growing dark. The storm was just beginning. The letter Marcus pulled from his personal safe was written on paper so old it had begun to yellow at the edges. The handwriting was feminine, elegant. Howard's first wife, Margaret, writing to her lawyer in 1982, "Howard isn't himself anymore. The money has changed him. Last night, he missed Victoria's piano recital to close a deal. When I confronted him, he said, 'I'm building all of this for them.' He doesn't see that he's building walls instead of homes. The children feel it too. Even little Charlotte has stopped running to the door when he comes home." Sarah read the letter in the Peninsula Suite's early morning light, while Emma slept in the next room. Marcus sat across from her. More documents, spread between them, pieces of a puzzle Howard had kept hidden for decades. "There's more," Marcus said, sliding forward a stack of papers. Hospital records from 1975, before the first tower, before the Empire. Howard was a resident surgeon then. Sarah scanned the documents, her professional eye catching key details. He was a doctor, top of his class at Northwestern, specialized in rehabilitation medicine. Marcus's voice softened. He had a different vision back then. Wanted to build a network of affordable rehabilitation centers, but in those days, the profit margins were in real estate development. What changed him? His first patient died. a young construction worker injured on one of the luxury developments going up downtown. Insurance wouldn't cover the full treatment he needed. Marcus pulled out a newspaper clipping. Howard Canterbury, at a groundbreaking ceremony, dated just months after the patient's death. He decided that making money was the answer. With enough wealth, he could help everyone. But the wealth became the purpose instead of the means, Sarah finished. Another document emerged from Marcus's briefcase, a draft of a business plan dated 1975 in Howard's handwriting. The title read, Comprehensive Care Initiative, Making Rehabilitation Accessible to All. The framework was almost identical to the Canterbury Mitchell Foundation's current mission. He carried this dream for 50 years, Marcus said quietly, buried it under towers and deals and family warfare, until you pulled him out of that lake. Emma's voice came from the doorway, making them both start. It wasn't random, was it? Him swimming that morning? Marcus met her eyes. Howard hadn't swum in that lake for 40 years, not since... Since what? Since he tried to save that construction worker from drowning there. The accident that changed everything. Marcus spread out more documents. Old police reports, insurance claims, newspaper articles about a tragic construction accident near the lake. He failed to save him then. But you, Sarah, you succeeded where he couldn't. It woke something in him. Sarah's phone buzzed. Charlotte. Canterbury requesting a private meeting. Then another message. Alexander's team had found the 1975 business plan in Howard's archived files. A third alert. Victoria was calling an emergency press conference. They're figuring it out, Marcus said. The pieces are coming together for them too. This was never about the money. This was about finishing what he started. Emma picked up the old business plan, her scientist's mind analyzing. These patient care protocols, they're decades ahead of their time. And look, this section about preventive care and long-term rehabilitation, it's exactly what Dad needed, what we couldn't afford. Sarah thought of Howard in his hospital bed, telling Lucy stories about special ducks, about second chances, about seeing the value in what others overlooked. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Lucy's ballet teacher. The little girl had dedicated her next recital piece to my grandfather, who taught me that being different is being special. Marcus smiled. Howard said you'd understand. That's why he chose you. Not because you saved him, but because you spent your life doing what he gave up on, helping people heal, regardless of their ability to pay. The siblings, Sarah began, need to heal too. Marcus gathered the documents carefully. Victoria was 12 when her father missed that recital. Alexander was 9 when Howard stopped coming to his science fairs. Charlotte was 6 when she stopped running to the door. New notifications lit up Sarah's phone, leaked documents about Howard's medical past spreading online. The story was transforming in real time. "Mom," Emma said softly, "this changes everything, doesn't it?" Sarah looked at the old letter, the business plan, the news reports, artifacts of a dream deferred but never forgotten. "No," she replied. "It just helps us understand. Howard didn't want me to build his legacy. He wanted me to help his children rebuild theirs." Outside the suite windows, Chicago was waking up to headlines about Howard Canterbury's secret past as a doctor. In boardrooms and blog spaces, 3 siblings were discovering their father's original dream, the one they'd never known about, the one that had shaped their lives through its absence. Marcus stood, straightening his tie. "Victoria's press conference is in an hour. She'll have questions." "Good," Sarah said, thinking of bridges instead of walls. "Because I finally have answers." The legal complaint hit the courthouse steps like a declaration of war. 147 pages of allegations, all aimed at dismantling Howard Canterbury's final wishes. Sarah read the summary while Marcus's team of lawyers argued strategy around her in the Peninsula's conference room. Emergency petition for injunctive relief and estate review plaintiffs. Victoria Canterbury Drake, Alexander Canterbury, Charlotte. Canterbury defendant, Sarah Mitchell, re. Undue influence and fraudulent interference with inheritance. They're alleging a pattern of manipulation, the head lawyer explained, highlighting key passages. Claiming you orchestrated the Lake incident, used your medical background to gain his trust, exploited his declining health to influence the will changes. Sarah looked up from the document. They're saying I pushed him into the lake. They're suggesting you knew his morning routine, that the rescue was staged. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. Ms. Canterbury Drake's team has obtained security footage showing your car in the area 3 days before the incident. I swim there every morning, Sarah said quietly. Have for 6 years. Another lawyer stepped forward. They're also questioning every interaction you had with Mr. Canterbury after the rescue, every dinner, every meeting. They've even subpoenaed your daughter's scholarship records, suggesting a pattern of financial inducement. Emma, who had insisted on being present, stood up sharply. That's ridiculous. Mom didn't even want me to accept the scholarship. Marcus, silent until now, cleared his throat. There's something else. Victoria's press conference this morning. She revealed Howard's medical history with a spin. She's painting him as a traumatized former doctor who was manipulated by a physical therapist who reminded him of his past. Using the truth as a weapon, Sarah murmured, remembering Howard's warnings about his children's tactics. Her phone buzzed with an alert. Charlotte's blog had just posted Howard's original 1975 business plan, but with a devastating analysis suggesting Sarah had discovered it early and used it to manipulate her way into Howard's life. The lawyers continued their debate about counter-motions and jurisdictional challenges, but Sarah's attention was drawn to a smaller document that had fallen from the complaint. A photograph recently taken, Lucy at her ballet class, looking out the window at the photographers who now followed her everywhere. Sarah stood up, silencing the room. Enough. Ms. Mitchell, we need to discuss strategy. No. Sarah picked up the photograph of Lucy. We're not fighting this their way. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What do you suggest? Sarah pulled out her phone, opening her calendar. The first rehabilitation center is scheduled to open next week. Originally, it was going to be a quiet launch, given the litigation. Change of plans. I want every media outlet there, every camera, every reporter. The plaintiff's lawyers will try to stop it. One of the attorneys warned. Let them try. The permits are approved, the staff is hired, and there are already patients. Scheduled. Sarah's voice took on the same steel she'd heard in Howard's. Victoria wants to talk about her father's medical past. Perfect, let's show Chicago exactly what that past inspired. Emma caught on first. The construction worker, the one he couldn't save. Find his family, Sarah instructed Marcus. Offer them honored guest status at the opening. And Lucy's ballet recital this weekend. Make sure every camera sees her dedication to her grandfather. Understanding dawned in Marcus's eyes. Fighting fire with light. Charlotte wants to expose the truth? Help her. Release Howard's full medical school records, his residency journals. Every detail of the young doctor who wanted to help everyone, not just those who could afford it. The lawyers shuffled uncomfortably. Ms. Mitchell, this is highly unorthodox. So, is using a drowning rescue to heal a family. Sarah looked around the room. Howard spent 50 years building walls. We're going to spend 50 minutes tearing them down on live television. Her phone buzzed again. Alexander's team had filed additional motions, but below that notification was a message from an unexpected source, Victoria's teenage son, sending a video of Lucy practicing her ballet dedication. The caption read, "Mum won't let us say it publicly, but some of us understand what grandfather was trying to do." Sarah gathered the legal complaints into a neat pile. File whatever motions you need to. But understand this. I'm not fighting for control of an empire. I'm fighting for Howard's original dream. The one his children never knew about. The one that scared him so much he buried it under billions of dollars. She handed the stack of legal papers back to the head lawyer. Their lawsuit claims I manipulated Howard Canterbury into betraying his family's interests. Time to show Chicago that I'm actually helping him keep a 50-year-old promise to his patients, to his profession, and most importantly, to himself. Marcus smiled for the first time that day. Bridges, not walls? Exactly. Sarah looked out at the city Howard had shaped, and the first step is showing his children that they're not just heirs to an empire, they're heirs to a healing legacy they never knew they had. The group text chain between the Canterbury grandchildren had exploded over the past week. Emma stared at her phone, watching the messages scroll between Lucy's siblings and cousins. Michael, Victoria's oldest, 19. Did you guys see grandfather's med school yearbook? He was chief resident. Lucy, 7. I'm dancing for him tomorrow, Mom says. I can't, but Hannah says I can. Jake, Alexander's son, 16. Mom's going crazy about the clinic opening. Says it's going to tank company stock. Sophia, Victoria's middle child, 15. Who cares about stock? Did you see those old patient files? He was actually helping people. Lucy. Emma says he helped people like her dad. Can she come to my recital? Emma's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She hadn't meant to become their confidant, but somehow, over the past weeks, she'd become a bridge between the generations. Perhaps because she understood both worlds, the weight of medical bills and the dreams of helping others. They're texting you again, aren't they? Sarah asked, looking up from the rehabilitation center blueprints spread across their temporary suite at the peninsula. They have questions. Emma showed her mother the screen. About Howard, about medicine, about what happened to Dad. They've never dealt with real life before. A new message popped up. Michael. Mom's having a meltdown. Found my med school applications. Says I'm betraying the family business. Emma replied carefully. There's no better business than helping people. Sophia. That's what grandfather's journal said. I found more in his office. Jake. Guys, this is bigger than we thought. Just found Dad's old drawings. He wanted to be an architect. Design hospitals? Lucy. Emma, can you help me practice my dance? It's about special ducks and special people. Sarah watched the messages flow. They're choosing sides. No, Emma said. They're choosing healing, just like Howard did in the end. She typed another message. Lucy, I'll help you practice. Your grandfather understood that special things come in unexpected ways. Her phone rang. Michael Canterbury, Victoria's rebel son. Emma, can we meet? There's something you need to see. An hour later, Emma sat in a quiet coffee shop near Northwestern's campus, staring at Michael's laptop. He'd found Howard's personal journal from medical school, hidden in a box of old tax records. The entry on display was dated the day after, the construction worker's death. Failed another one today. Insurance denied the treatment that could have saved him. Keep hearing his daughter's voice. Please, doctor, we'll find a way to pay. There has to be a better way. Drawing up plans for accessible care centers. Margaret says I'm dreaming too big, but what's the point of dreaming small? Mom never knew about this, Michael said quietly. None of them did. He never told them why he switched from medicine to real estate. Emma thought of her own father, of the treatments they couldn't afford, of the doctors who'd wanted to help, but were bound by system constraints. He was trying to change things from the outside, but he got lost along the way. Michael closed the laptop. I got accepted to medical school. Haven't told Mom yet. She wants me to get an MBA. Take over her position eventually. Through the coffee shop window, Emma could see protesters gathering outside the upcoming rehabilitation center opening. Their signs read, Save Canterbury Corp. And Stop the Hostile Takeover. Her phone buzzed with more messages. Sophia. Found. More journals. Guys, he wanted to build something, not just towers. Jake. Dad's freaking out about stock prices, but I showed him grandfather's old drawings. Lucy. Miss Hannah says I can do my dance. Mommy's mad, but I don't care. Michael showed Emma his medical school acceptance letter. Grandfather's last gift wasn't money, it was permission to be who we really are. Emma thought of Howard's final days, of his talks with her mother about bridges and healing. She typed one last message to the group. Your grandfather never forgot his first dream. He just needed someone to remind him it was still possible. Maybe that's what family really means, helping each other remember who we're meant to be. The replies came quickly. Michael, see you at the clinic opening. Front row, Sophia, bringing grandfather's journals. People need to know. Jake, working on something. Dad's old hospital designs, plus grandfather's care plans. Lucy, Emma, I made Sir Quacks a doctor costume. Outside, the protesters' signs waved in the Chicago wind, but in a quiet coffee shop, the next generation of Canterburys was choosing a different kind of legacy, one built on healing, not hiding, one bridging past dreams with future possibilities. Howard's final letter was found in an unexpected place, taped to the bottom of Sir Quack's favorite bench at Lincoln Park Zoo. Lucy discovered it during her weekly duck-feeding ritual, her name written on the envelope in her grandfather's distinctive hand. Inside was a flash drive and a note, for when the walls start falling. The timing couldn't have been more precise. Victoria's legal team had just obtained an emergency hearing. Alexander's financial maneuvers had frozen 3 of the rehabilitation center's accounts. Charlotte's latest exposé threatened to reveal what she claimed were devastating irregularities in the foundation's structure. Now, in the Canterbury Tower's main conference room, the family gathered to watch the contents of the flash drive. Sarah sat beside Emma, aware of the history weighing down every moment. Victoria stood by the window in her father's old spot. Alexander paced near the door. Charlotte lounged against the wall, her jade pendant catching the light. The grandchildren, led by Lucy, clustered together on one side, an island of hope in a sea of tension. Marcus plugged in the drive, and Howard Canterbury's face filled the screen. He looked tired but peaceful, recording this in his final days. If you're watching this, he began, then the battle lines have been drawn exactly as I predicted. Victoria, you've filed injunctions. Alexander, you're moving money around. Charlotte, you're digging for dirt. And Sarah, you're probably wondering why I put you in the middle of this storm. He shifted in his hospital bed, picking up an old leather journal. This was my first medical diary. Inside is the story I should have told you all decades ago, the day everything changed, the day I chose walls instead of bridges. Howard opened the journal, reading, April 15th, 1975, lost James Connor today. Construction accident at the new Kingston development. Insurance denied coverage for the extended rehabilitation he needed. His daughter begged me to help. I failed him. Failed them all. He looked up, his eyes sharp, despite his failing health. That day, I decided money was the answer. If I had enough power, enough resources, I could change the system from the inside. But power corrupts, and walls are easier to build than bridges. Victoria stirred by the window. On screen, Howard continued, I missed your piano recital that year, Victoria. You played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Margaret recorded it. I still have the tape. Alexander, I wasn't there when you won the science fair with your hospital design program. And Charlotte, you stopped running to greet me, started running away instead. He held up another document, the original plans for his rehabilitation centers. I convinced myself I was building an empire for you, but I was really building a fortress around my own failure, until Sarah pulled me from that lake. The camera moved, showing Howard's hospital room window. She didn't know who I was, didn't check my wallet or my watch, just saw someone who needed help and acted, like I used to do, before I forgot why I became a doctor in the first place. Lucy sniffled, softly. Michael put an arm around his youngest cousin. So here's the truth, my children. The foundation isn't a punishment. It's not even really about the money. It's about finishing what we all should have started together. Victoria, your organizational genius. Alexander, your innovative thinking. Charlotte, your fierce dedication to truth. These aren't weapons to use against each other. They're tools to build something meaningful. Howard lifted a familiar photo, the Christmas picture from 1985. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to remember who you wanted to be before I taught you that money was all that mattered. Victoria, you wanted to run a children's hospital. Alexander, you designed healing spaces. Charlotte, you wrote stories about helping people. His voice softened. The real inheritance isn't in the bank accounts or the real estate. It's in the chance to become who you were meant to be. Sarah understands this. So do your children. The only question is, do you remember? The screen split, showing security footage. Victoria playing piano in her office late at night. Alexander sketching building designs in Dubai. Charlotte volunteering. At a homeless shelter under an assumed name. The walls are coming down, Howard said finally. They have to, because I've made sure the only way forward is together. The foundation structure requires all of you, your skills, your passion, your hearts. Sarah isn't your enemy. She's the bridge I never had the courage to be. The video ended with a last image. Howard holding Lucy's drawing of Sir Quacks, smiling at its crooked beauty. Silence filled the conference room. Then Lucy, with a child's perfect timing, asked, "Is this why my dance is so important, Mommy? Because it's about special things." Victoria turned from the window, tears tracking silently down her face. Alexander stopped pacing. Charlotte's hand went to her jade pendant, a gift from the father she'd spent decades trying to expose. Sarah stood quietly. "Your father left one more message, just for you three." She handed each sibling an envelope. "He said to open them when you remember who you wanted to be." Outside the tower windows, Chicago stretched toward the sky. A city of walls and bridges, of barriers and connections. And in a conference room high above it all, 3 Canterbury children held letters from a father who'd finally learned that the greatest legacy isn't what you build, but what you heal. The court transcript would later show that the turning point came at exactly 10:47 a.m. when Victoria Canterbury Drake approached the witness stand. The gallery was packed. Reporters, business leaders, and most surprisingly, every Canterbury grandchild old enough to attend. Lucy sat in the front row, still wearing her ballet costume from the morning's recital. "Court, please state your name for the record." Victoria Canterbury Drake. Victoria Canterbury Drake. "But I'd like to make a statement first, Your Honor." Plaintiffs. Attorney. "Objection. We prepared specific testimony." Victoria. "About my father's piano recordings." The courtroom stirred. Sarah, seated at the defense table, watched Victoria pull out an old cassette tape. Victoria. "This is from 1975. The night of my piano recital. The night everything changed." Judge. "Ms. Canterbury Drake, this hearing is about the validity of your father's will." Victoria. "It's about much more than that, Your Honor. May I?" She inserted the tape into a player. The sound quality was poor, but the music was clear. A 12-year-old Victoria playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. In the background, a man's voice, Howard's, could be heard saying, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, emergency at the hospital. A patient needs me." Victoria. "I found this in his office last night along with these." She held up a stack of papers. Alexander's childhood hospital designs, Charlotte's early stories about helping people, clippings of their youthful achievements. Every moment Howard had missed, he had secretly documented. Victoria. "We've been fighting the wrong battle, Your Honor. My father didn't change his will because Sarah Mitchell manipulated him. He changed it because she reminded him of who he used to be, who we all used to be." Alexander stood up from the plaintiff's table. "I'd like to withdraw my claims, Your Honor." He pulled out his own papers, recent designs for the rehabilitation centers, merging his architectural vision with his father's medical legacy. Charlotte was next, her jade pendant catching the courtroom lights. I have a new blog post to enter. Into evidence. She handed copies to the clerk. The title read, The Real Canterbury Legacy, A Daughter's Confession. The judge peered over his glasses at the three siblings. Am I to understand that the plaintiffs are withdrawing their case? Victoria. Not exactly, Your Honour. We're admitting we were wrong, and we'd like to present a new proposal. She nodded to Marcus, who distributed documents to the court. The header read, Canterbury Mitchell Foundation, Joint Leadership Structure. Victoria. Our father built walls because he couldn't save one patient. We built walls because we couldn't save him from his guilt. But Sarah Mitchell did what none of us could. She showed him it's never too late to build bridges instead. Lucy's voice piped up from the gallery. Like Sir Quacks, different but special. Laughter rippled through the courtroom, breaking the tension. Sarah watched the Canterbury siblings, Victoria's proud posture softening, Alexander's nervous pacing stilled, Charlotte's defensive slouch straightening. Judge, given these extraordinary developments, I'll need time to review. Victoria. Actually, Your Honour, time is crucial. Our first rehabilitation centre opens in 2 hours, and we'd like to present a united front. She turned to Sarah, extending her hand. If you'll have us as partners instead of opponents. The transcript notes a recess was called at this point, though it doesn't record Lucy running to hug her mother, or Michael showing the judge his medical school acceptance letter, or Charlotte finally touching the jade pendant and smiling. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered as the Canterbury family emerged together for the first time in decades. Victoria stepped to the microphones. Today marks a new chapter for the Canterbury legacy, not as a real estate empire, but as what it was always meant to be, a force for healing. My father was a doctor before he was a developer. He lost his way trying to help people through power instead of purpose. Sarah Mitchell didn't steal our inheritance. She helped restore it to what it should have been all along. Alexander joined her. The Canterbury Mitchell Foundation will combine our business expertise with our father's original vision. Every rehabilitation centre will fulfill a 50-year-old promise to make quality care accessible to everyone. Charlotte spoke last. My next book will be about bridges, not walls, about how sometimes it takes a stranger to help you find your way home. Sarah stood slightly apart, watching the family rebuild itself in front of the world's cameras. Emma squeezed her hand as Lucy darted between the adults, her ballet tutu incongruous against their business attire, her laughter healing decades of silence. The court transcript ends with a simple notation, case dismissed by mutual consent. But the real story was written in the tears on Victoria's cheeks, the designs in Alexander's hands, the jade pendant Charlotte finally wore with pride, and in the distance, just visible from the courthouse steps, the first Canterbury Mitchell Rehabilitation Centre waited to open its doors. The deed to the first Canterbury Mitchell Community Health Centre was signed at dawn, 30 days after the courthouse revelation. Sarah's signature flowed across the bottom of the page, followed by Victoria's precise script, Alexander's architectural flourish, and Charlotte's bold strokes. In the margin, Lucy had added a small drawing of Sir Quacks wearing a doctor's coat. The contractors are ready, Alexander said, spreading out his revised blueprints across the conference room table. The original Canterbury Tower boardroom had been transformed. Gone were the intimidating leather chairs and dark wood panels, replaced by collaborative workspaces and walls of windows. We've modified the design to include more natural light. Studies show it speeds recovery. Victoria nodded, pulling up the operational projections on her tablet. First-year estimates show we can serve 3 times the patients we initially planned. If we redirect some of the tower's maintenance budget, already done. Charlotte interrupted, her jade pendant catching the morning light. I've been auditing our real estate holdings. We can convert 6 more properties into satellite clinics by year's end. She smiled slightly. Turns out all those years investigating corporate finances had a purpose. Sarah studied the documents before her: medical licenses, staffing plans, community outreach programs. Each piece reflecting Howard's original vision, enhanced by his children's unique talents. "Have you shown Michael the residency program proposal?" Victoria's expression softened at the mention of her son. "He's helping design it. Wants to make sure future doctors understand both the medicine and the mission." She paused. "He's wearing Howard's old stethoscope now. Found it in a box of tax records, of all places." Emma entered the room carrying research data from her summer project. "The preventive care statistics are incredible. If we can implement this system across all locations, we will," Alexander assured her. "Starting with the neighborhoods that need it most." He turned to a map of Chicago, marked with potential expansion sites. "Dad built towers that reached for the sky. We're going to build centers that reach the people." Lucy burst in, still wearing her ballet shoes from morning practice. "Mommy, the ducks at the new center's pond had babies." She climbed onto Victoria's lap, a barrier broken that would have been unthinkable months ago. "Can we name them after the doctors?" Charlotte pulled up her latest blog post on her laptop: "Canterbury Legacy Reborn, from Real Estate Empire to Healthcare Revolution." The comment section was filled with stories from Chicago residents sharing their own healthcare struggles and hopes. "The waiting list for the first center is growing," Marcus reported, entering with his ever-present tablet. "And the board, actually, approved the sliding scale payment system unanimously." He smiled. "Though it helped that Victoria can be very persuasive." Sarah touched the deed gently, remembering Howard's words about bridges and healing. The document represented more than property transfer. It was a transformation of purpose, of family, of legacy itself. Her phone buzzed with a message from the contractor. They'd found something during the renovation. Behind an old wall, a framed medical license, Howard Canterbury, MD, and beside it his first patient log, the construction worker's name written in careful script. "We should display it in the entrance," Victoria said, reading over Sarah's shoulder. "Along with this." She pulled out an old photograph, Howard in his residency, young and idealistic, helping a patient take their first steps after surgery. "Next to this," Alexander added, producing his childhood sketch of a hospital design, now professionally rendered into the building taking shape across town. "And this," Charlotte said quietly, opening a leather journal to a page filled with her father's handwriting. "Today I helped someone walk again. There is no tower tall enough to match that feeling." Lucy tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Can we put Sir Quack's picture too? Grandfather said special things help people remember what matters." The morning sun streamed through the boardroom's new windows, catching the jade of Charlotte's pendant, the gold of Victoria's piano note necklace, the silver of Alexander's architect's scale, light-touching pieces of the past as they built something new. Outside, Chicago's skyline stood as a testament to Howard Canterbury's first legacy, towers of glass and steel reaching toward the clouds. But inside, his children were crafting his true legacy, one that reached toward people instead. Sarah gathered the documents: deed, licenses, blueprints, and plans. Each signature a promise, each page a bridge. "Time to open those doors," she said. Together they stood looking out at their city. Victoria humming Moonlight Sonata under her breath, Alexander sketching healing spaces in his mind, Charlotte planning stories of hope instead of exposure, and Lucy dancing between them all, reminder of the simple truth Howard had finally remembered. The greatest monuments aren't built upward, but outward, connecting heart to heart, healing soul by soul. The Chicago Tribune article, published exactly 1 year after Howard Canterbury's will reading, painted a very different picture than the sensational headlines of the previous year. Canterbury Mitchell Centers, a legacy of healing. 1 year, 6 centers, 10,000 lives changed. Sarah read the article in what had once been Howard's penthouse office, now transformed into a sunny, collaborative space. The story detailed the foundation's first year. Rehabilitation centers opened in underserved neighborhoods, innovative payment systems making care accessible to all, medical residency programs training the next generation of compassionate physicians. But it was the photographs accompanying the article that told the real story. Victoria teaching piano to young patients in the pediatric rehabilitation wing, her corporate armor softened by a child's smile. The caption noted she split her time between CEO duties and music therapy programs, finally combining her business acumen with her first love. Alexander standing in front of his latest architectural creation, a center designed with healing in mind, where natural light and peaceful spaces worked alongside medical science. His son Jake beside him, already sketching ideas for future buildings. Charlotte, her jade pendant glinting, leading a support group for families navigating medical challenges. Her investigative skills now focused on identifying communities most in need of their services. Michael, in his white coat, working with patients alongside Emma during their medical school rotations. Both had chosen to specialize in rehabilitation medicine, carrying Howard's original dream into a new generation. And Lucy, performing her now famous Sir Quack's dance at center openings, reminding everyone that being different was being special. "The quarterly reports are ready," Marcus announced, entering with his tablet. But even his professional demeanor couldn't hide his satisfaction as he shared the numbers. Treatments provided, lives improved, families helped. Metrics measuring humanity instead of just profit. Sarah's phone buzzed with the daily group text. "Victoria, mother-son piano recital still on for tonight? Pediatric wing patients excited. Alexander. Flying in from Dubai site review. New center design approved. Charlotte. Blog post about patient success stories going viral. Real change happening. Lucy Y. Sir Quacks had babies. Can we name one after grandfather? Emma popped her head in, still wearing her white coat from morning rounds. Mom, you need to see this. She led Sarah to the center's main lobby, where something new had been installed overnight. A wall of photographs told the Canterbury story. Howard. As a young doctor, the towers he built, the family he loved, the legacy he almost lost. And in the center, the photograph of Sarah pulling him from the lake. Not the moment that changed everything, but the moment that reminded everyone who they were meant to be. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "Some build towers to touch the sky, others build bridges to touch hearts. The greatest legacy is not in what we own, but in how we help others heal." Howard Canterbury, MD, the afternoon sun streamed through the lobby's windows, designed by Alexander to cast light in healing patterns. From the therapy room came the sound of Victoria's piano, accompanying patients learning to walk again. Charlotte's voice drifted from the family support center, turning investigative skills towards solving individual struggles instead of exposing corporate sins. Sarah touched the plaque gently, remembering Howard's final words about bridges and walls. Her phone buzzed one more time, a message from an unknown number, but this time instead of threats there was a photograph. Sir Quacks and his new ducklings, taken by Lucy that morning. The message read, "Different is special. Thank you for teaching us that." Through the front doors came a steady stream of people, patients finding hope, families finding support, medical students finding purpose. Each one touching the plaque as they passed, reminded that sometimes the greatest acts of healing come disguised as simple kindness. And in every corner of the building that had once been just another Canterbury Tower, bridges were being built. Walls were coming down, and a family's legacy was being rewritten, one healing heart at a time. Outside, Chicago's skyline still reached toward the clouds. But now, alongside the towers Howard built, grew something even taller. The promise that every life touched, every hand held, every heart healed was a monument more lasting than steel and glass. A promise kept, a legacy renewed, a future built. on the foundation of a simple truth, that in the end, we are all just people helping people find their way home.